Shalom everyone. Listen, this video is also a bit different than my other videos. I want to talk about domestic violence. Okay? Now, basically, what is domestic violence? That's behavior that causes harm, injury, or sometimes even death or lifelong damage to people of the same household. A household can be a married couple, it can be an extension, a married couple and their children, or it can be just an extended family, for example, the grandparents, nephews, cousins, you get the idea. But it can also be between close friends or people that associate together, for example, at a job or at a social club. Now, there's a lot of research done about domestic violence because it's a very common phenomenon in every culture, in every community. It happens. So there's a lot of research about it. There's one thing I won't say upset, but something that annoys me a bit is that oh, okay, I was wrong, I'm sorry. Here you have violence against women, here you have violence against men. I didn't notice this violence against men before. Nevertheless, there is more about violence against women than violence against men. So there's still a bias in this. Your men still don't have, how do I say, the same I would say it's the same institutional help available to women when they are the victim of domestic violence. Now, I'm not making this video to complain. I'm making this video because I wanted to point out something. And there may be some scholars or maybe some preachers out there who've made the connection. But I wanna I wanna reveal to you something about domestic violence that people often don't consider. Okay? And what is it about domestic violence will you want to consider, Rashid? Well, first of all, common sense understanding of domestic violence. Domestic violence is about power. It's about one individual in the close group that wants to get something at the expense of the other, and he or she, because females can also be the perpetrators of domestic violence, he or she wants to get that perceived benefit at all costs without any regard for someone else. And that individual has some advantage, whether it's physical advantage or emotionally they have an advantage. That happens often between parents and children. The children are in an emotional disadvantage because they aren't emotionally developed. Anyway, the perpetrator is in an advantage, whether financially, physically, or emotionally, and they're using that advantage to the disadvantage of the people close to them. Why? Because they understand and know the people close to them well, so they know the weaknesses of those people, and they use their weaknesses to get what they want. So domestic violence has to do with power. It has to do with someone having a will that's not in harmony with the will of the Most High, nor the well-being of others. Okay, so that's what domestic violence is about. It's about power. Okay, but now, why is domestic violence such a rampant problem? Now, people will say, preachers will say, and theologians will say, well, human beings are born in sin, and because of that, sin is a problem. That's true. That's true. I'm not denying it. But just because people are sinners does not mean that they engage in all sinful and all evil activity. Okay? So even though people may be born in sin, like all of us were, there's still environmental contributions to our behavior and how we perceive others, etc. Okay? So what is the connection I wanted to make? Maybe you're already guessing it. I'm going to type it in now. By the way, I'm just using Wikipedia now because I just want to show to you guys there's a lot of research done to it, but I also recommend you to read the books and reports. Of course, in the English Wikipedia, you have a lot of references that you can go to, a lot of books also. Okay, domestic violence and human sacrifice. Let me see if, yes, human sacrifice. Yeah, the internet is, no, it's not a bit slow here. And also, there's a lot of investigation done to human sacrifice also. This was done by the Celts. They would build a wooden doll of a couple of stories high. They would make a large face on it and they would prick people. They would put people on it and let people die. Or they would light it on fire also and people would die by the fire. Human sacrifice was practiced by all cultures and all religions throughout history. And it was quite rampant. It's through it's through the Hebrews, through the Bible, both Old and New Testament, that human sacrifice became reduced throughout the world. I say reduced because there are still places where they practice human sacrifice, and form some forms of human sacrifice are still practiced, but in a hidden way. Now, why am I talking about human sacrifice and domestic violence? Because, first of all, human sacrifice is a ritual murder, as it's already said, as it's said here. It basically works like this, and you also have preachers talk about it, praise the Lord. You also have scholars that became Christian that talk about it. One of them is Rene Girard. He has passed away, passed in 2015 at 94 years old. But anyway, it works like this. Human sacrifice is basically the community charging their frustrations upon selected victims, and they murder those victims in such a way that everyone's frustration is released upon the victim. The violence of the community is released upon the victim, and it has two effects. It has a releasing effect. People's violent urges are met, and at the same time it scares people. So, and that fright that people receive by the ritual, it builds a defense mechanism in their how to say it, in their emotions, so that they will avoid violence at all cost. So, um, ritual murder or human sacrifice, it basically is a deter for crime by forcing people to get involved with a collective crime, and everyone has to be involved so that nobody can blackmail each other, so that nobody can compare themselves with one another. And it worked. People pretend as if human sacrifice is something, well, it was done by primitive people, we don't do such things today. Oh, it was practiced by the most advanced civilizations. The ancient Egyptians practiced human sacrifice. The Assyrians practiced human sacrifice, the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, the Hittitians, the Aegeans, the ancient Chinese, ancient Japanese, the ancient Koreans, um, the Aztecs, the Mayans. They all practiced it because it worked. Now, what's the effect of human sacrifice? It reduces everyday violence by enforcing institutionalized violence. And as I mentioned before, there's a scare. The effect, the magic works in two ways. First, people have a release for their anger, but it scares them also because it's something bad happening, and people want to avoid that bad thing. So because of that, people will attach themselves to all kinds of regulations and rules to prohibit them becoming the victim, or basically it's basically a kind of traumatic effect that it has on people, but it's a magical effect. People feel released, they feel connected to the community, and because they feel connected, they invest more in the community, they you get what I'm saying here. What happens now is that human sacrifice has become outlawed by most countries and most communities. You still have capital punishment from time to time, but besides capital punishment, people don't want human sacrifice. Christianity had a transforming impact on humanity. You see? But now, human sacrifice was basically the foundation of religion. People often say, well, there's so much violence in the world because of religion. If we just end religion, everything will be fine. That's not true. It is because there is violence. That's why you have religion to regulate the violence. And then you have the state, the politics that deal with the regulations, the economic regulations of violence that religion cannot deal with. You see, that's how it is. And of course, it has to do with sin. It has to do with self-centeredness. So, human sacrifice was a release to prevent chaos and to prevent random violence throughout the community. Now, ask yourself this. Ask yourself this, people. If there is no outlet for human violence and human frustration collectively to bind all people together, then what happens to the everyday violence? The everyday violence increases. And how does it increase? In the households. Then you will have one family who is involved in human sacrifice, and they abuse and they don't do it anymore. But now the future generations of that family will basically they will target each other with their violence. Now those children witness violence, and now when they grow older, when they have their children, they have the tendency to repeat the violence or to sustain the violence because they won't speak out against it because when they did in their past, bad things happened to them. So what do societies do now? Societies cannot annul the impact of Christianity. They can't do it. So what are they doing? Societies are basically they are covering up the violence. And how do they cover it up? By rationalizing the violence. For example, child abuse is often regarded as discipline, even though it is proven by observation that hitting children, whether it's spanking or whether it's using the belt or using a weapon upon children, that it has a damaging psychological impact on the development of the child. And this damaging development will manifest in all kinds of addictions and compulsive disorders when the child has reached adulthood, or when they have grown up. So child abuse is wrong, but yet people call it discipline. Children are ought to be seen, not heard. Okay, but what if a child is abused? Should a child still be seen and not heard? So there's a form of covering up. Sexual abuse is also part of domestic violence. It's also covered up. You see, domestic violence, I'm going to say this, and people may be upset with me that I'm saying this, but domestic violence, let me go back, is basically the blueprint of society. Just think about this for a moment. In society, you have one group of people we call the elite. Those are the ones with a lot of, at least, what we perceive as spiritual power. They have a lot of insight. and they have the tools, the gold and the silver, or let's say the money, to bribe people to do their bidding. And the elite is often led by one guy. A leader is called the king, or in some regions it's the president. And then you have another layer of people in the community that are sustaining the elite. They are the semi-elite. And then you have the rest of the population, who are the workers that really do the work in the community. And then you have the lowest, and then you have the victims of the community that nobody wants to talk about: the poor, the outcasts, the homeless, such people. So basically, the whole structure of society itself is a structure of domestic violence. You have a group of people, we label them as the top, we call them the elite or whatever name you call them. They want benefits, but they want it at all costs without any regard for the rest of the community. And now on the lower scale, in families, you also have this pattern going on. You have maybe it's the father or the mother or maybe a sibling somewhere in the group that wants benefits at the cost of someone else. So what happens now? Now you have people that we call the elite. They are the big bullies basically, and they are the ones threatening the rest of the community with economic sanctions. And because people don't want bad things to happen, they conform. And then you have people who do the same thing but on a lower scale. And everyone in the community is teaching their children to submit and conform to the domestic abuse of the community. But the children are taught not to see it as domestic abuse. Domestic abuse. The children are taught to see it as order, see it as civilization, see it as advancement, whatever label they name it. Children are taught to doubt their own perception, to doubt the evidence they see in front of them, but to trust the opinions and the judgment of the elders, the leaders, or whatever the elite prescribes to them. And what happens now? The community now begins to police each other. If someone is not in line with the domestic program, then it's not the elite that will go after those people, but you have their own people around them that will attack that individual. And that's how the whole structure is held in place. So society itself is a blueprint, a pattern of domestic violence. You see? And so think about it. If society itself is a blueprint of domestic violence, where victims, where people victimize each other and evidence is ignored, only in extreme cases do they have what we call a legal system where people are prosecuted and sentenced. If that's how society operates, then that's an extension of what happens in the home. So it would be useless to fight against domestic violence if the structure you are defending and working for is itself an extension of domestic violence. That's the same as you want to fight one shade of darkness by defending a darker shade of darkness. It doesn't add up. What it comes down to, folks, is that people don't want to repent. They don't want to acknowledge the Most High. And the consequence of them not acknowledging the Most High, of doing things their own way, with their own understanding, is domestic violence. And this domestic violence extends itself to what we call society. Society is basically the imaginary mechanism into which people deny the violence that's going on. Society implies denial. You cannot be a part of society without being in denial. That's how the world operates. You have to deny the abuse, you have to deny the violence, you have to deny the exploitation. And you have to blame the obvious victims. You see, why do you think so many people are so scared of what other people think of them? Why? Because listen, if you are victimized and you realize that people don't aren't willingly to deal with your victimization, but they tend to act out against your victimization, then what are you going to do? You don't want to be victimized any further. You don't want any further damage, so you will behave. You will do whatever you can to prevent anyone noticing any form of weakness or victimization. And when you see someone is a center of contention, you tend to avoid that individual so that the contention won't fall upon you. Or you may contribute and aid in the victimization of others so that people would see you as a friend and not as an enemy. Of course, not every this is not an absolute statement I'm making. There are exceptions, of course. Nevertheless, domestic violence is basically how the world operates. And that's why the only thing the world can do is find strategies and distractions how to cope with the violence. But they can never end the violence. And that's why you have all this entertainment to distract people, to occupy people. That's why you have all these um, all this pressure being laid upon you in schools and in on the workplace. Why? Is to distract people and occupy people so they won't have much time and resources left to get into, let me say, to become violent. Because violence is contagious, people. Look, I just wanted to make this video just to point something out to you. Okay? That's why if you were the victim of either wife beating or a husband beating, or if you were targeted by your parents or by bullies at the playground at school, understand now that it's not just an isolated incident, it's how the world operates. Listen, if the world was a safe place where indeed people fought against crime, then did why did you were you so scared of admitting what happened to you? You did not want to admit what happened to you because you knew you would be further victimized. That should alarm you already about the world you're living in. And the thing is, folks, every society needs to deny their violence. Every society needs to hide their ugliness and to have a friendly and, how do I say it? They need to have a laughing face. Every society needs it in order to keep people calm. But what's happening now in the world is that the ugliness of the world is becoming more and more visible. And this is a process that's the result of the impact of Christianity. You see, Christianity is basically the light of the world. True believers are the light of the world. The Bible is God's word, which is a light unto mankind. So what happens now, whenever the light appears, darkness is exposed. And when darkness is exposed, or the ugliness is exposed. And when people persist in the ugliness, no amount of human sacrifice nor distraction will be effective anymore. So it will either be people repent and they are safe, or they finish off with each other. And that's what's happening with the world now. The world at large, the majority is rejecting the gospel, but the gospel has become so influential and so dominant that even when people are resisting the gospel, whether it's through Satanism or whether it's through violent atheism, even their resistance, whether they're aware of it or not, is still a promotion of the gospel. Because they are resisting the gospel so much that they have to mention the gospel. Because listen, if you are so angry against something, then sooner or later you have to point out what you're angry about. And in their resistance against the gospel, against true Christians, and against the Bible, in all their attempts to discredit and in all their rage against it, they are promoting it without being aware of it, because their resistance is proving that what the Bible is saying is right. So the world is realizing now, those demons and those also those people that are antichrist are realizing now that waste of time, and it's a loss. It's a no-win situation for them. So what are they doing now? They're denying that they've lost. But what happens now? Because the gospel has illuminated the world, and all the distractions are becoming less and less effective. Now their violence is increasing, and their evil is working itself out. Evil is self-defeating. So now the self-defeating end of evil is now manifesting in front of us. So that's what I wanted to share with you. So realize, people need Christ. You can come with all kinds of distractions and strategies to cope with it. Eventually, it's all. Let me say it like this: when you cope with the disease is not removed. The disease is still there. The damage is still there. The danger is still there. You shouldn't cope with it nor deal with it. You should be delivered and freed from it. That being said, you all, may the grace of Christ Jesus be with you. Shalom.